Hey, what is up mortals? It is TCCrew here with a new video for you. Welcome to part 6 of What If Quirks Were Outlawed. I just wanted to greet you guys by just saying, sit back and relax, you're in for a treat. So, we begin. After the incident with Night Eye, the vigilantes took it slowly for a while. There were two reasons for this. Number one was that the AQTF were more active than ever before. The defeat of Night Eye had hit them hard, especially since it was just after Endeavor was defeated. The media were still kept in the dark about the vigilantes, and Midoriya was starting to wonder why. The second reason for them slowing down was that Midoriya needed to recover after his beatdown. Night Eye had left him battered, but everyone knew that the green-haired boy would only grow stronger thanks to this. The issue, however, was with both Kirishima and Bakugo. The adults refused to let the teens patrol unless they were in groups of two. And that was the issue. Bakugo and Kirishima were still like ice and fire. They simply didn't get along with each other. Their incompatibility meant that they couldn't be placed in the same patrol group, which meant that they needed to patrol with one of the adults. This also meant that they couldn't cover as much ground, so they couldn't properly patrol until Midoriya had recovered. It took some time, but Midoriya was eventually back in a close peak condition. He hadn't just recovered either. The other vigilantes noticed a change. He had a little more confidence, and it looked like he had been practicing something new. They didn't question it, however, and quickly returned to patrolling. Midoriya was grouped up with Kirishima, and they set out to try and find the latter's friends. Kirishima was worried about being recognized at first, but that worry quickly vanished after his first patrol. The teen had taken Midoriya's advice and changed both his hair color and style. He now had spiky hair that almost resembled Bakugo's, and it was a dark red instead of its usual black. His costume consisted of an open black vest with dark red and a short-sleeved undercut. To cover the bottom part of his face, he had a scarf wrapped around his neck so that it covered both his mouth and nose. The two vigilantes carefully made their way through the dark streets, keeping their eyes and ears up for any criminal activity, or the AQTF for that matter. They were patrolling the parts that Kirishima thought his friends were most likely at, but they weren't having any form of luck. They had searched almost every place that Kirishima could think of, but their lack of results could also be a result of the fact that Midoriya didn't really know what to look for.
You know, this would be much easier if you told me the names, quirks, and appearances of the people we were looking for.
Midoriya stated, his voice being relatively calm through his worry. Kirishima thought about it for a second, until he mentally face-palmed when realizing that Midoriya was right.
Yeah, right. We're looking for the three people, 2 girls and 1 boy. The boy is called Ojiro. He's blonde and his quirk is a mutation type that gives him a tail. The girls are called Mino Ashido and Ochako Uraraka. The former has pink skin and horns, and her quirk lets her secrete a type of acid. The latter has short brown hair with brown eyes, and her quirk lets her remove gravity from any object she touches.
The now red-haired teen said, probably explaining the appearance and quirks of people they were looking for. Midoriya was intrigued by the trio's quirks, for he found them interesting in many ways, but one thought that passed through his mind made him rather sore.
So what you're trying to say is that we couldn't miss them even if we tried? And that gives them 3 possible explanations for us still being empty-handed? The first being that we simply are worthless when it comes to searching, which is totally possible. The second being that they are incredibly good at hiding, in which case we don't have to worry about them getting arrested by the AQTF, or...
The green-haired boy carefully explained, until he stopped himself before talking about the third possibility. Kirishima stopped to look at Midoriya, for he could almost predict what the green-haired boy was about to say. Midoriya observed Kirishima's reaction as he finished his explanation.
The third possibility is that we aren't looking in the right places, in which case we might never find them. But the simple fact that we haven't been there yet tells me something critical. You don't want us to go there,
the green-haired boy said, sounding like he was interrogating the red-haired boy. Kirishima shivered and looked a little scared upon hearing this, which was enough evidence to say that Midoriya had been correct with his statement. The green-haired boy knew that he was right, but he was worried. If Kirishima was this scared by just thinking of it, what kind of place could it be?
What are you hiding?
Midoriya asked more kindly, hoping that Kirishima would open up to his words. The red-haired teen looked uncertain about what to say. like he would rather just forget what he knew and never rediscover it. He then clenched his fist as he realized that he needed to talk about it.
There's a place that I haven't shown you yet, one that is hidden from the outside. But we're better off not going there, for it can only be explained as hell,
Kurishima said, sounding like he was afraid. Midori wanted to ask a follow-up question, but the red-haired teen answered it before he could ask.
It's what one calls an underground fight club, a place where you can fight with your quirk, and there are almost no rules. It's a haven for crime where the worst kind of people gather to do their shady business, but the worst is the people running it,
Kurishima said, still sounding terrified. Midori was very concerned for Kurishima, but he still needed to know what they might be dealing with.
What makes them so bad?
The green-haired boy asked, still trying to remain calm. Kurishima took another breath, steadying himself before giving an answer.
It's run by a Yakuza that is alone terrifying, but this group is worse. They're called the Shai Hazakai, with a man named Overhaul as their leader. They have incredibly powerful members with different types of quirks, but Overhaul takes the cake in that category. His quirk gives full control over whatever matter he touches, and he can kill you with just a touch of a single finger.
The red-haired teen said, now sounding more terrified than ever before. Midori was both shocked and scared upon hearing this. The fact that this fight club was running by the Yakuza was terrifying enough. But for the same Yakuza to have so much power was just pure insanity. He didn't want to believe that the people they were looking for could be there, but the fact remained that it was a possibility. The way that Kurishima spoke made him imagine that he and his friends had been there before, and it wasn't such a pleasant experience. That alone was enough for Midori to say that they shouldn't go there. But that voice was overpowered by the idea of Kurishima's friends being there and being in trouble. The green-haired boy looked at his red-haired companion, giving him a stern look, as he said,
You're not going to like this, but we can't leave that stone unturned.
With a voice that tried to be as calm as possible, Kurishima's expression changed into a mixture of shock and anger as Midori continued by saying,
I'm not saying that we need to go in there without being absolutely certain, but right now it seems that they aren't anywhere on Earth, which means that they are either in heaven or...
But it was cut off by Kurishima, who finished his sentence by saying,
Hell.
With a distraught voice. Kurishima could feel how conflicted Kurishima was. On one hand, he wanted to find his friends. On the other, he didn't want to be anywhere near that place. The red-haired teen clenched his fist before taking a deep breath and saying,
Fine, but if we encounter Overhaul, you need to promise me that you won't let him touch you under any circumstances, not even for a handshake.
With a somewhat angry tone, Midori was shocked to hear this tone, but he understood immediately. Overhaul could control matter, so shaking hands could result in dying before he even knew what was going on. The green-haired boy shook his head in response to his companion. Without uttering a single word, Kurishima still looked a little angry, or maybe uneasy, as started walking while saying,
Follow me.
Midori didn't wait for a second before falling slightly behind Kurishima. The duo maneuvered themselves through different parts of the city, until they eventually came to a stop. The place they were looking for had its entrance in a secluded alleyway, one that no one would guess actually led to a fight club. Not a single sound was emitted from the normal-looking entrance door, and not a single trace could be seen of anything else. Occasionally they would see someone enter through, but there wasn't anything else that suggested any form of activity. Therefore, this place might as well not exist in Midoriya. But Kurishima couldn't stress enough that behind that door was the place that he remembered as hell. The two vigilantes observed the seemingly unguarded entrance from a rooftop, the only place that Kurishima felt comfortable observing it from. They were waiting for a sign, anything that would tell them what they needed to know. Midoriya was waiting patiently, and looked like he could stay there for a while with no problem. Kurishima, however, wasn't handling it very well. The green-haired teen looked ready to leave at any moment. He didn't even want to be here in the first place.
I've got a bad feeling about this. Can we leave now?
Kurishima whisper-shouted, sounding a little angry as he did. Midoriya could tell that his companion was hiding his fear behind that anger, but it didn't stop him from watching the door.
I'm not leaving until I'm sure,
Midoriya said, sounding as calm as the wind. Kurishima couldn't understand how his companion managed to remain so calm, but he ultimately took it as ignorance of the danger that they were in.
Alright, I'm gonna go, and be safe. You can stay here and be sorry.
The red-haired teen said, finally having enough of what they were doing. Midoriya was about to say something that would hopefully calm and convince Kirishima to stay, but he was interrupted by something he saw. The green-haired boy could see that someone else was about to enter through the door to hell. The figure was wearing a cloak that covered most of his body, but there was a part that it could never hope to cover up. Midoriya almost smiled upon hearing this, as he looked towards Kirishima and said,
I don't think that you have to leave just yet. Someone with a blonde tail is about to enter.
Kirishima shook upon hearing this, as he quickly snapped his gaze towards the entrance. He only managed to get a glimpse of the figure, but it was more than enough for him. Kirishima looked wide-eyed as he slowly turned towards Midoriya and said,
That's him, that's Ojiro.
With a worried tone, Midoriya could understand Kirishima's worry, for one of his friends just had walked into the place that they shouldn't be at.
What's the odds of someone else having the exact same tail as Ojiro?
Midoriya then asked, hoping to make sure that it really was Ojiro that he saw. Kirishima shivered a little as he answered,
Pretty damn low.
With a half-trembling voice. Midoriya thought this was the case, as he then asked,
But if so, that's Ojiro who just went in. What's the odds of the other two being in there already?
Kirishima thought about it for a second, until he reached an answer that he didn't want in the slightest.
Pretty damn high.
The red-haired teen answered reluctantly, not wanting to believe what just came out of his own mouth. Kirishima knew what came next. Who wouldn't? If they wanted to not only retrieve his friend, but also save them, he needed to go down there and get them. But anything could happen down there. No one stops anyone from doing it. If they go down there, they might never come back. But if they don't, they might never save his friends.
It's your call. I can't make the decision to go down there since I barely know what we're dealing with. I won't go down there on my own, but at the same time, I won't force you to go with me. So you decide on what we do.
Midoriya then said, knocking Kirishima out of his thoughts. The red-haired teen was surprised by this, but he didn't let it show. He wanted to say that they needed to leave, but he couldn't. He wasn't just that his friends were down there. It was that he felt pathetic. Midoriya had saved him from Endeavor, and he did it without a second guessing. If he didn't stand up and get through this now, he would be insulting Midoriya, and he wouldn't deserve to stand by his side. Kirishima clenched his fist hard, steeling his nerves as he settled on what to do.
Alright, then we're not leaving without them.
The redhead said, sounding just as angry as he was determined. Midoriya smiled after seeing this result from his companion, before he said,
Lead the way.
While pointing toward the door that he knew as the gate to hell. Getting into hell was much easier than Midoriya had expected. Turns out Kirishima knew exactly how to get in with a minimum amount of problems. Before entering, they made a precaution to always wear their masks, so that the wrong person wouldn't know their faces. Upon entering the door, the teens were met with a staircase that led underground. They took the steps downwards, noticing how the hall twisted at certain occasions, until they finally made it all the way down. Upon reaching the bottom, they were met by an environment that matched Kirishima's description. A massive arena-like room that was packed full with spectators surrounding a cage ring in the middle. Midoriya took a good look around and could see criminals of different shapes and sizes, which scared him to a certain extent. But he managed to pull that fear away, for he had a mission.
We need to stick together. We're as good as doomed if we get separated. Let's find them and get out quickly.
His voice barely audible through the shouts and bellows. Midoriya agreed with his companion, as they both forced their way through the tough crowd. Searching was not easy with this many people. It could take all day, and the longer they stayed, the more dangerous they were in. Midoriya searched the area with his eyes, until he noticed some strange figures. Their body structures were normal, but it was their faces that Midoriya was wondering about. These figures wore some sort of bird-like masks, and they looked like they were guarding some secluded area of the club. The green-haired boy wondered who these figures were, until he remembered that Kirishima had told him earlier. The redhead had told him that Overhaul and his men all wore these types of masks, which meant that these figures were with the Shy Hazakai. Midoriya's gaze observed the room that they were guarding. It had a massive glass window so that one could see through it, and its decorations only said that this was the VIP room. The green-haired boy was about to keep analyzing the crowd until something caught his attention in the VIP room. That attention, however, quickly turned into horror when he finally realized what he was seeing.
Hey, is that the VIP room?
Midoriya asked, standing still and voice trembling slightly. Kirishima looked towards the room as he answered.
Sort of. Overhaul always sits there, watching over the matches like a damned hawk.
The redhead said, trying to make his voice heard. Midoriya shivered upon hearing this, for things were much worse than they appeared to be.
And things are a lot worse than I initially thought. Look what's inside the VIP room.
Midoriya then said, sounding like things had escalated for the worst. Kirishima was confused upon hearing this tone of voice, but that confusion quickly turned into horror once he saw what Midoriya meant. Standing next to Overhaul were two teenage girls, and he recognized them both. They were Mina Ashido and Ochako Uraraka, but he still couldn't see Ojiro. The redhead was about to ask about it, but it was interrupted by an announcement within the ring. Both vigilantes turned their attention towards the ring, and noticed that they were announcing a new fight. On one side was a huge man named Kendo Rappa, who apparently was Overhaul's strongest fighter, and on the other side was the third person that they were looking for. On the other side of the ring was none other than Mashiro Ojiro, and he looked ready to fight. A silence filled the air, and the ring stood completely still. Then the starting bell was sounded, which would ironically be the ending bell too. Rappa had thrown his punch right as the bell sounded, and it was at an incredible speed. Ojiro stood no chance, and he was knocked out immediately. Both Midoriya and Kirishima were shocked to see this, but one of them shouldn't have been. Midoriya then quickly switched gears as he turned towards Kirishima and said,
We need to do something now. I don't care how we do it, but we need to get in there.
With a voice that sounded a little angry as he pointed towards the VIP room. Kirishima only agreed to this and told Midoriya that he had a plan. The two of them walked up into the entrance of the VIP room before they started to attack and beat the guards. They managed to get a few hits in, but they were overwhelmed and dragged into the room. Upon entering, they were thrown to the floor with quite a lot of force, which made them both grunt in pain.
There, we're in,
Kirishima said, grunting through his newfound pain. Midoriya got a little annoyed as he responded by saying,
Yeah, but that doesn't justify your idiotic plan.
While also grunting a little.
What has the cat dragged in now?
A cold and terrifying voice said. Both teens looked towards the speaker and saw that it was none other than Overhaul. He was sitting in a chair and looked slightly annoyed. Midoriya was going to say something, but he was interrupted by another voice.
Kirishima?
It said. They both turned their gaze towards its source and saw that it was a surprised Ashido.
Yeah, we can save it until after we get out of here,
Kirishima responded, which confirmed the pink-skinned girl's suspicion. Ashido nodded in understanding as she stood close to the quiet Uraraka.
What makes you think that you can leave?
Overhaul then asked, sounding more ominous than before. Kirishima and the girls were all dead silent in response to this horrifying presence, but the person who spoke up was Midoriya.
Because we said that we were going to do so,
the green-haired boy said, earning a shocking expression from the others. Overhaul was surprised that the green-haired boy had the guts to speak up, but that surprise was quietly replaced by curiosity. The Yakuza leader carefully observed Midoriya until he spoke.
Are you perhaps one of those vigilantes? That one that defeated Endeavor?
Overhaul said, his voice sounding just as ominous as before. Midoriya was shocked and wondered how Overhaul knew about that, but then realized that he probably had a lot of connections. The green-haired boy didn't answer that question and remained silent. The Yakuza leader was both pleased and impressed by Midoriya's answer, but it also served to make him more curious.
You're impressive, so I have a proposition for you. I'll arrange a fight between you and a fighter of my choosing. If you win, your friends may go scot-free.
Overhaul said, his voice still being ominous. Midoriya was a little intrigued, but he was also afraid.
And if I lose?
The green-haired boy asked, trying to remain as calm as possible. Overhaul didn't change his expression, as he answered by saying,
Then you and your friends will start working for me. Also, need I remind you that the other option is to die right here and now?
Now it wasn't just Midoriya that was terrified. Kirishima, Ashido, and Uraraka were equally scared. Midoriya needed to win. If he doesn't, they will either be enslaved or dead. Silence filled the room until Kirishima spoke up.
Let me fight then!
The redhead almost shouted, pushing away his terror. Overhaul was unaffected by this as he responded by saying, No, I specifically asked for him. He defeated Endeavor, so I believe that he is more qualified to do this. With the same cold voice as before, Kushima hanged his head in shame, for it was partially true. Midori had defeated Endeavor, and even managed to fight and outmaneuver Night Eye. If any one of them was qualified to do this, it was him.
Don't worry, I don't plan on losing.
Midoriya then said, his voice trying to be reassuring. Kushima looked at his green-haired friend, noticing his smile, before he calmed down and nodded. Midoriya then looked towards Overhaul, expression looking stern as he said,
I'll do it!
with determination behind his voice. Overhaul was as cold as ever, but one could sense the hint of a smile behind his mask. But that quickly vanished, as he looked serious and said, Very well. What do I call you? With a voice that wasn't nearly as ominous as before. Midoriya looked a little confused upon hearing this, but he didn't get to say anything before Kushima answered for him.
Dekuro! His name is Dekuro!
The redhead said, almost sounding proud. Midoriya looked at him in confusion, which prompted Kushima to explain himself.
What? I believe that you can do it!
The redhead shouted, trying to fire the green-haired boy up. Midoriya was almost a little weirded out, but that quickly vanished when an unknown voice spoke up.
Please win, Dekuro!
The fragile voice said, which turned out to be a teary Uraraka. Midoriya was shocked to see this, but it only served to make him more determined to win. The green-haired boy then looked at Overhaul, who stood up from his seat and said, All right then. You've chosen your name and you're motivated. Now I'll tell you who your opponent is. With his usual ominous voice, Midoriya was unshaken, for he didn't care who his opponent was. Overhaul slowly walked up to the green-haired boy, looking ready to pull the rug from underneath him. As he finished his sentence, You'll be facing my strongest fighter, Kendo Rappa. Thank you all for sticking around, and I hope that you enjoyed. Before you leave, we would just like to let you know that we display this and many other channels for your entertainment and viewing purposes. All the information you'll need is right below here in the description, so feel free to check out all the other incredible projects our team creates. I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. That's all for today's video, so goodbye and have a divine day.